A single snowflake can trigger an avalanche. And this winter, that snowflake has buried Vladimir Putin's empire under tons of frozen chaos. Supply trucks are abandoned on highways stretching across 11 time zones. Airports are shuttered. Rail lines are blocked by ice mountains 20 feet high. Moscow, the beating heart of Russia, is slowly suffocating as millions of citizens find themselves completely cut off from the outside world. Welcome back to Mr. Warlog, where we uncover the reality behind the headlines. What I'm about to show you isn't just a weather disaster. This is the moment when nature exposed the fatal weakness in Putin's war machine. While the Kremlin boasts about conquering territories thousands of miles away, they cannot even deliver bread to their own capital. Today we reveal how Moscow's frozen isolation is becoming Putin's worst nightmare. You need to see what state television won't show you. Behind the propaganda broadcasts about military victories, Russia is experiencing its most severe logistical collapse since the siege of Leningrad. This isn't hyperbole. Independent meteorologists are calling this the harshest winter in 40 years, with temperatures plummeting to minus 50 degrees Celsius in key transport corridors. But the cold is only half the story. The other half is systematic failure. For decades, Putin's regime has funneled every available resource into military expansion while allowing civilian infrastructure to crumble. Roads that should have been repaired years ago are now impassable death traps. Heating systems designed in the Soviet era are breaking down when people need them most. Emergency services that should be rescuing stranded citizens are either overwhelmed or simply missing. Let's start with the numbers that will shock you. According to leaked internal reports from the Ministry of Transport, over 14,000 cargo vehicles are currently stranded across Russia's highway network. These aren't just delivery trucks carrying luxury goods. These are the lifelines carrying medicine, heating fuel, and basic food supplies to cities that depend entirely on external shipments for survival. The M7 highway, Russia's primary east-west artery, has been completely impassable for 6 days. Ice storms have created barriers that even military vehicles cannot penetrate. The backup route through the Ural Mountains is experiencing similar conditions. Drivers who attempted to push through are now trapped in their cabins, surviving on emergency rations while rescue crews struggle to reach them through the frozen wasteland. Moscow's Domodedovo Airport, one of Europe's busiest transport hubs, has been operating at less than 10% capacity for the past week. Flight cancellations have reached 95% as ice accumulation makes runways unusable. Thousands of passengers are sleeping on terminal floors, waiting for conditions to improve. But meteorologists warn this is only the beginning of the storm system. The railway network, Putin's supposed backup plan, is faring even worse. The Trans-Siberian Railway, once the pride of Russian engineering, has been paralyzed by frozen switching mechanisms and blocked tracks. Freight trains carrying critical supplies from China and Central Asia are stuck hundreds of miles from their destinations. Some have been motionless for over a week as crews work around the clock to clear ice from the rails. But here's where the story becomes truly alarming. This isn't just about delayed deliveries or travel inconveniences. Moscow, a city of 12 million people, imports 80% of its food from other regions. When transport networks collapse, supermarket shelves empty within days. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Grocery stores in central Moscow are implementing strict rationing systems. Customers can purchase only 2 loaves of bread per family. Fresh produce sections stand completely bare. Pharmacy shelves are running low on critical medications as supply shipments remain frozen on distant highways. The mayor's office has activated emergency food distribution centers, but even these are struggling to maintain adequate supplies. The heating crisis adds another layer of desperation to this nightmare. Natural gas pipelines are experiencing pressure drops as pumping stations lose power during the storm. Apartment buildings across the city are reporting heating failures. Families are burning furniture to stay warm while authorities scramble to restore energy infrastructure. Emergency services paint an even bleaker picture. Moscow's ambulance fleet has been reduced by 60% as vehicles cannot navigate icy streets. Fire departments report response times have tripled due to impassable roads. Police stations in outer districts have lost communication with Central Command as telecommunications infrastructure buckles under the weight of accumulated ice. The human cost is becoming impossible to ignore. Hospitals are treating record numbers of hypothermia cases as people attempt dangerous journeys through the frozen city. Elderly residents in high-rise buildings are particularly vulnerable, trapped in unheated apartments with no way to reach ground-level emergency services. Social media posts from Moscow residents reveal the growing panic behind official statements of calm. Videos show empty store shelves, massive lines at the few functioning gas stations, and desperate crowds surrounding emergency heating centers. One resident posted footage of people breaking into abandoned vehicles just to scavenge fuel and supplies. The psychological impact extends far beyond physical hardship. Muscovites who once felt insulated from the consequences of Putin's foreign adventures now face the reality that their government cannot protect them from basic natural disasters. The social contract that promised stability in exchange for political compliance is cracking along with the frozen infrastructure. Regional governors are sending increasingly frantic requests to Moscow for federal assistance. But the central government faces its own paralyzing dilemma. Military resources that could help with disaster relief are committed to foreign operations. Civilian emergency equipment has been neglected for years in favor of weapons production. The very war machine that Putin built to project power abroad has left his homeland defenseless against winter storms. Weather forecasts offer little hope for immediate relief. The storm system currently battering western Russia is expected to intensify over the next week before moving toward the Arctic Ocean. Even when temperatures eventually rise, the damage to transportation networks will take months to repair. Spring flooding could make conditions even worse as melting ice overwhelms drainage systems that were already struggling. International observers are watching Moscow's crisis with growing concern. This logistical collapse demonstrates vulnerabilities that extend far beyond weather-related challenges. If Russia's capital cannot maintain basic services during a winter storm, questions arise about the regime's ability to manage more complex emergencies or sustained external pressures. The Kremlin's response has been predictably inadequate. Official statements blame Western sanctions for infrastructure problems while promising swift restoration of normal services. But empty promises cannot clear frozen highways or repair decades of systematic neglect. The reality on Moscow's streets tells a different story than the one broadcast on state television. This crisis represents more than just a temporary inconvenience. It exposes the fundamental weakness of an authoritarian system that prioritizes military spending over civilian welfare. When the first major test arrives, the facade of competent governance crumbles as quickly as the ice-covered roads that were supposed to connect this vast empire. The domino effect is accelerating beyond anyone's worst predictions. As Moscow freezes in isolation, the ripple effects are spreading like cracks in ice across Putin's entire empire. Regional capitals that depend on the capital for coordination are now making desperate decisions independently. Governors who once waited for orders from the Kremlin are declaring local states of emergency without federal approval. St. Petersburg, Russia's second-largest city, has effectively sealed its borders. Regional authorities announced that all available heating fuel must be reserved for local residents. Supply convoys heading toward Moscow have been redirected to emergency shelters within the city limits. This isn't cooperation between regions. This is survival mode where every territory hoards resources for itself. The economic consequences are spiraling out of control faster than anyone anticipated. The Moscow Stock Exchange suspended trading after energy company shares plummeted 40% in a single morning. Currency markets are in chaos as the ruble crashes against major currencies. International investors are fleeing Russian assets, recognizing that a country unable to supply its own capital represents an unacceptable risk. Banking systems are experiencing unprecedented strain as panicked citizens attempt to withdraw cash before ATMs run empty. Electronic payment networks are failing as data centers lose power and backup generators run out of fuel. In a country increasingly dependent on digital transactions, the return to a cash-only economy during a supply crisis creates additional layers of chaos. The agricultural sector faces catastrophic losses that will impact food security for months. Livestock across western Russia are dying in unheated barns as farmers cannot obtain feed deliveries or veterinary supplies. Dairy production has collapsed as processing facilities shut down due to power failures. Even when the storms pass, rebuilding food production capacity will require resources that Russia simply doesn't have. Military analysts are noting something extraordinary happening within Putin's armed forces. Units stationed near major transport corridors are being quietly redeployed to assist with civilian disaster relief. This represents a fundamental shift in priorities that signals just how severe the crisis has become. Soldiers who were supposed to be training for foreign operations are now clearing ice from highways and distributing emergency rations to stranded civilians. The redeployment reveals another critical weakness in Putin's strategy. The military equipment designed for combat operations proves largely useless for civilian rescue work. Tanks cannot clear blocked highways without destroying the road surface. Artillery units have no relevant skills for repairing power grids. The specialized nature of modern military forces means they offer little value in addressing infrastructure collapse. Intelligence sources report growing tensions within the defense ministry as commanders argue over resource allocation. Some generals want to maintain focus on foreign objectives regardless of domestic conditions. Others insist that homeland security must take priority over territorial expansion. These disagreements are creating paralysis at the highest levels of military command. The international community is watching this disaster with a mixture of concern and strategic calculation. European Union officials are privately discussing whether to offer humanitarian assistance to Russian civilians while maintaining sanctions against the regime. The moral complexity of this situation creates diplomatic challenges that have no clear precedents. China, Russia's supposed ally, is demonstrating the limits of their partnership during this crisis. Beijing has quietly suspended several major infrastructure projects in Russia, citing force majeure clauses in their contracts. Chinese companies are protecting their investments rather than risking additional losses in an increasingly unstable environment. North Korea, ironically, has offered to send emergency supplies to Moscow. This represents a stunning reversal where one of the world's most isolated economies is offering aid to what was recently considered a major power. The symbolism of this gesture will not be lost on ordinary Russians who remember when their country was feared and respected globally. Social unrest is beginning to manifest in ways that should terrify the Kremlin. Videos circulating on encrypted messaging apps show crowds attempting to storm government buildings in several provincial cities. These aren't organized protests with political demands. These are desperate people seeking shelter and supplies from authorities who have none to offer. The generational divide in Russian society is becoming more pronounced during this crisis. Older citizens who remember Soviet-era shortages are adapting more quickly to rationing and resource scarcity. Younger Russians who grew up during the oil boom years are struggling psychologically with the sudden collapse of modern conveniences they considered permanent. Moscow's university students are organizing underground networks to share information about food distribution points and safe shelter locations. These informal communication systems are operating outside government control, creating the foundation for civil society organizations that could challenge state authority in the future. The regime that sought to eliminate independent thinking has inadvertently created conditions where such thinking becomes essential for survival. Regional separatist movements that had been dormant for years are showing signs of renewed activity. The Kremlin's obvious inability to maintain basic services provides ammunition for groups arguing that local self-governance would be more effective than centralized control from Moscow. These movements remain small and scattered, but they represent potential fractures in Russian territorial integrity. So there you have it. While Putin promises to conquer the world, he cannot even keep his own capital warm. Mother Nature has done what NATO never could, exposing the hollow foundation beneath Russia's imperial ambitions. What do you think? Can Putin survive when his own people are freezing in the dark? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to see how empires crumble from within, not from foreign armies but from their own neglect, subscribe to Mr. Warlog. I'm Charlie from the Mr. Warlog team. Stay warm, stay informed.